This session is about group functions at RIST. Society is made up of myriad of groups, and these groups are made up of individuals, obviously. So the basis of society are the individuals that work together in their groups. Now, we're going to take a look at some basic building blocks of groups. We're going to look at how they're sized, the time they spend together, and also the purpose behind their time together. To do this, we will be examining different types of groups all at the same time. So there's basic group elements. Some of them are very common sense. For instance, a group is 2 or more people. Within a group, there must be interaction. Also, within a group, there must be shared expectations. And finally, a group must have some sort of common identity. These 4 basic elements make up what a group is. So let's first take a look at group size. Now, group size can be 2 people, called a dyad. Each member continues the group. That means that if one chooses to leave the group ceases to exist. That makes making decisions quite difficult, because if one doesn't agree, they can just leave the group. Then there's a triad. This is a 3-person group. It's a more stable group, because if one person leaves, they still have a group of 2. So decisions are a lot easier because 2 can outvote 1. And then we have small group. And a small group is anywhere from 4 to 15 people. It must have face-to-face interaction. And if it gets too big, if it gets beyond 15 or so people, generally what happens is that the group that's gone beyond 15 people will then go ahead and divide itself into smaller groups automatically. So let's go ahead and take a look at time, our second major component. Time in groups vary. Sometimes the group will only be together for a short time, while other instances a group might be together a long time. And time does not mean that it's continuous around the clock. You can be in one group one time and a group another time. So it's not constant. You can be one group in the morning time, you could be in another group during the afternoon, and yet another group in the evening, and even groups in between these 3 times of the day. So what is the organization and purpose of a group? Well, there's 2 types of organization or purpose. First one is a formal one. Now, a formal one has a very clear structure to the group. The goals are very well defined, and generally, if you want to think of it in examples, it's work. Now, the other type is informal, the opposite almost. Here, informal group, there is no established rules, or very little established rules, and the conduct is not specified. You don't have to act a certain way to remain part of the group necessarily. This could be likened to friends hanging out. So here at RIST, when you're teaching, managing groups is quite essential task in your teaching method. You need to make sure that all your groups have, of course, the 2 or more students, which is easy. You have interactions taking place in those groups. The people in the group, along with the teacher, have shared expectations, and there's some sort of common identity that they can relate to. The groups that you arrange should vary in size at different times of the year. You should put students in dyads and in triads and in small groups and mix that rotation up and around to give them a variety of settings. Teachers should also vary the times of the group. Some groups might take several weeks or a long period of time to do a project, while others might just take 20 or 30 minutes. So you want to rotate how long groups stay together. Also, you need to recognize that students have other group obligations outside of the class. And so when you think about what type of work and how to assign the work, also keep in mind that they have group obligations in other classes and also outside of the school. And finally, you want to keep your groups formal groups in class. That means structured and goal-driven, so that you can get the most out of the time that you have together. Alright, some more types of groups. There are secondary groups. And secondary groups generally tend to have impersonal interaction. They're goal-oriented. They're usually together only for a short time during the day or during lifetime. Your worth, or what the person feels, the value they feel, is based on their performance. Again, an example of this would probably be work. Primary groups, on the other hand, are more intimate. They're key to development. It's where you first come into the world, are your primary groups. You stay with these primary groups for a very long period of time, and they tend to be quite small. They can also exist in secondary groups as friendships or close friends within a work setting. And so examples of this would obviously be the family that you are born into and the friends that you make throughout your lifetime. So group functions. What do groups try to do to keep their groupness? Well, they define their limits. They make sure that they know who's in and who's out of their group. So, for instance, you might be in the group, while others would be considered outside the group. So, in group and out group. Now, when looking at groups from a more macro level, a larger level, you can see that groups will tend to separate themselves by symbols, or if in this case maybe crests of family, trees, and so forth. These groups also tend to see outsiders as competition. So you might get one group versus another group to get the same thing. They also tend to have different views. One group will see themselves in a positive light, while that other group outside, they will tend to see more negatively or more suspiciously. So what about RIST boundaries and our students here, and how as teachers we should think about these? Well, we have to remain vigilant, especially when dealing with in-groups and out-groups. Students will form in-groups and out-groups, and these in-groups and out-groups can often create unfair exclusion and treatment between the people that are in the group and those who are outside the group. Now this can lead, obviously, to the well-known bullying scenario, but it could also lead, in its worst case scenario, lead to fights and arguments. So it's always important to be on the lookout for those groups that are forming within our students. Another set of functions that a group will try to institute is leadership. Generally, leaders influence others either by appointment or assignment. They've been assigned to be the leader of the group, or their skill makes them rise to the top and people look to them as a leader. So there's two different types of leader. We have instrumental and expressive. Instrumental tends to be thoughtful. They think through the plans and then they try to institute those plans with the group. Expressive, well, they also think, but they tend to be more emotional. They tend to express their feelings a little bit more to incite group togetherness. Instrumental, because they're thoughtful, tend to focus on the tasks that are needed to be done more so than, say, the expressive. The expressive, again, that leader looks to motivate, to rally the troops, to finish the project. Now the instrumental leader will be, again, focused on that goal and continually feeding the tasks that need to be accomplished to reach that goal. And the expressive leader, since he expresses his emotions and he motivates, he wants to build morale so the group tend to want and to desire to get things done on their own. So as an RIS teacher, how can this fit into our schema, our way of doing things with our students? Well, if instrumental leader, we need to be critical thinking. We need to be thinking through processes. And then with that thought process, we should create useful lessons for our students that are obviously tied to the goals that we want our students to achieve. But at the same time, we can't just be instrumental leaders in the classroom. We should also be expressive leaders. We should express our desires, whether it's a good desire or a bad desire. We should let our students see that and see our emotions as well in a modified sense. We should also give positive feedback to students and make sure that they know that they're doing a good job when they do a good job, and also show them how to do better when they could do better. And of course, look to reward students for their accomplishments as they accomplish and get to the next level of their learning. Goals and control. To maintain and push the group and keep it together, oftentimes the group will create goals, and these goals can lead on the group in a certain fashion. Now these big goals can be broken up into smaller goals, and the group tends to stay together in order to get that first goal done, and the second goal, and then finally the third, and then finally the biggest goal to be completed. Now, another way of keeping the group together is through norms, and norms tend to limit the group and show the boundaries of it. And if people go outside of those boundaries of the group, sanctions or punishments may occur. These types of groups that rely on the norms generally tend to be more secondary in nature than primary groups. Goals and control. So what would this look like for a teacher? Well, our goal would be to meet the objective of our lesson or of our unit or of our year. So we focus on that objective and we create units and we build assignments and activities to help us push towards that objective or that goal. And then when we get more comfortable enough, we start giving our students assessments to let them see where they can improve. And then they can self-evaluate and hopefully improve enough to meet that objective. Now, as far as norms go, norms are just basically expectations. What is expected of our students? And so, as a school, we need to have expectations of our students, both academically, behaviorally, and we need to define those boundaries. And if students get outside of those boundaries, we need to have classroom rules and a formal setting where they know what is expected of them in a structured way. Now, there's other groupings as well that are beyond just the typical primary, secondary group, informal, formal group. These are social categories, and social categories consists of groups sharing similarities, such as gender. So I might consider myself a man, and someone else would be part of the woman group, just by our similarities. Age, I would say that there's an elderly age, and then you could say teenagers as well, and they refer to themselves in social categories, and they identify themselves in those categories, and others do the same for them. Then there's social networks. Now social networks, again, is not a typical group in the sense that there's a day-to-day interaction, but people's connections drive the social network. Now these connections are built one off the other, off the other, off the other, until it could even look like a web, like you see. Now, there are no group boundaries in this type of group. There are direct relationships, just like in a normal group, but also indirect relationships. So, if I make a friend, and we have a relationship together, and they have a friend, but I don't really know that friend, I still have a connection to them, therefore I have an indirect relationship with the friend of my friend. And obviously, as that system of friends of friends and friends, of acquaintances of acquaintances of acquaintances grows and grows, the opportunities that open up in our lives become more and more, so our advancement opportunities become increasingly apparent. Other groupings, again, reference groups. Reference groups could be of religion, something you identify with, a sports group, whatever it might be. You tend to choose which reference group you're going to be a part of. Now, this is self-identification. The individual is identifying with the group. So, really, the group influences the individual by choice. But if the individual left the group would not know. So, this type of reference group determines the individual's beliefs or values, again, by individual choice. And this can be positive if it's a good group that's being referred to by the individual, or it can be negative in the sense that if a person is referring to a group that is not a positive influence, then it's not going to have a good positive influence on their beliefs or values. A fourth type of group that would be under other groups would be an aggregate. And an aggregate is just people together. Little commonality, very brief time, no formal structure or organization. Examples like this would be a line or a waiting room or something, walking in the hallway with people. A fifth other group, you could say, is online or e-communities. Now, there's certain characteristics that make this a group in a new way and also in an old way. First of all, it's based on the internet. You must be on the internet. And in a sense, that's a new way of existing in a group. And there's no face-to-face contact or no face-to-face contact required to be part of this group or this type of group. On the other hand, topics of interest drive the person to join these groups. Also, that can come from this type of group is knowledge exchange. Whether you're interested in building a model plane and wanting to learn how to do that, you can learn the knowledge that you need just by simply joining a group on the internet. And then, of course, you can also have primary and secondary groups on here. I, for instance, am part of my family, which is a primary group, and I still feel as close to my family as I have living overseas because I've had the internet. I've had the resources to talk to them almost every few days. And so there's also all types of interactions. Since there's so much communication and so much interaction on the internet, whether it be by video or email or chatting or social media, interactions of all forms, whether it be cooperation, competition, conflict, accommodation, they all exist on the internet. And so what does this mean for RIST teachers? Try not to remain aggregate in your classroom. Try to produce commonality. So to find commonality, you need to know the social category of your target audience, and that is our students or teenagers. And of course, build networks. Look at what their peers are participating in. How are they connecting with each other? What are their internet personalities like? And also reference groups. Know what type of reference groups your students refer to in order to get to understand them even better. And by doing this, teachers should engage teens in their lives. Use the internet. Help students expand those networks that they have in order to further develop themselves, encourage their personal interests, and introduce them to new topics of interest so they might be able to gain more understandings of how they work in their networks and in their groups. And so as RIST teachers, by understanding the groups and how basic groups work, and also how other groups that are emerging and developing on the internet work, we can better engage and teach our students.